What if the life you are living right now was not only one among many, but perhaps the very last one you will ever experience on this earth? This is not a question born from fantasy or speculation. It comes directly from the documented readings of Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet. During his lifetime from the early 1900s until his death in 1945, Cayce entered more than 14,000 recorded trance sessions. In these states, he described past lives, future potentials, and the soul's eternal journey with an accuracy and depth that continues to astonish researchers even today. Among the many subjects he explored, there is one that feels especially urgent: how to know if you are approaching the end of your incarnational cycle. Could this be your last life? In one of his most impactful readings in 1932, delivered during the Great Depression, when millions were searching for hope and meaning, Cayce stated that the soul's purpose was always to grow closer to its creator. Each life, he explained, was like a classroom where we learn lessons of patience, forgiveness, and service. But eventually, a soul can reach a point where those lessons are fully integrated. At that stage, earthly incarnations may no longer be necessary. This idea was not presented as a reward or punishment, but as the natural completion of a long spiritual curriculum. And the question that has haunted seekers for generations is, what are the signs? Cayce never reduced this mystery to a checklist, but across hundreds of readings, clear patterns emerged. When studied side by side, they reveal 5 powerful signs that your soul may be approaching its final earthly incarnation. We will go through these signs in detail, not as a form of judgment, but as a mirror for reflection. And I invite you to stay with me until the end, because the last sign is perhaps the most challenging, but also the most liberating of all. Before we dive in, let me ask you a favor. If this subject resonates with you, if you feel a connection with Edgar Cayce's wisdom, or with the possibility that you've lived before, please take a moment to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to this channel. Most importantly, leave a comment below telling me which of these signs speaks to your soul right now. I'll be reading and marking every comment with a heart, because this community is about walking this path together. So let us begin with the first sign, which Cayce often emphasized in the context of his healing work: the integration of the spiritual and the material. In Virginia Beach, where Cayce lived, and where the Association for Research and Enlightenment still preserves his archives, he would frequently remind people that spirituality was not separate from daily life. According to his readings, a soul nearing completion no longer experiences a division between what it believes and how it behaves. There is a profound alignment. Faith is not just an idea but a lived reality. One's work, relationships, and choices reflect inner truth. Cayce once described it in a trance as, "The life lived becomes the prayer offered." In other words, the person's very existence is a testimony of harmony between spirit and matter. The second sign is the natural flowering of compassion and detachment. During a session that transformed the life of a family in New York, Cayce explained that when the soul grows in maturity, personal ambition begins to fade. Not because ambition is evil, but because it is replaced by a deeper desire to serve. In these later stages of reincarnation, people feel less compelled to accumulate wealth, recognition, or control. Instead, they find fulfillment in kindness, generosity, and alleviating the suffering of others. It is not forced. It arises naturally, like a tree bearing fruit. Such individuals often live simple lives, but their presence transforms those around them. Cayce pointed to this as evidence that the soul had learned one of the hardest lessons: selfless love. But here is where no one expected the twist. Cayce warned that compassion must be balanced with detachment. He once told a woman that her desire to rescue everyone was in fact an obstacle to her own growth, because she was confusing service with control. True compassion, according to him, is about helping when called, but also trusting God's plan when things are beyond our reach. This balance of serving and letting go is a powerful indicator of spiritual maturity, one that shows the soul may no longer need endless returns to physical life. As we move deeper, the third sign grows even more mysterious, because it touches not only your actions but your perception of reality itself. Cayce spoke often of the sense of unity, the awareness that we are all part of the same source. This was not a philosophy for him, it was a lived reality he entered in trance states. In his own words, all souls are one in him, as rivers flow into the sea. For those near their last incarnation, this is not a metaphor, but a lived perception. Such people can no longer see others as enemies or strangers. They may disagree, they may fight for justice, but at the core they sense a common spirit. Forgiveness becomes easier, prejudice loses its grip, and love is extended even to those who wound us. Cayce considered this awareness of unity one of the strongest markers that a soul was nearing the end of its earthly schooling. The fourth sign that Cayce's readings consistently pointed to is what he described as the balancing or completion of karma. During the 1930s, when people came to him from all over the United States, Hopkinsville, New York, Virginia Beach, many asked why their lives were filled with such difficulty. Cayce explained that karmic experiences are not punishments, but opportunities. Each challenge, whether an illness, a broken relationship, or a financial struggle, is a chance for the soul to learn something it had not yet mastered. But he also noted that there comes a time when those karmic debts are resolved. In a reading given during the years of World War II, Cayce told a soldier's family that their son's suffering was not because of past mistakes, but because his soul had already balanced those accounts. He was living not to pay back, but to teach others courage and faith. This, Cayce emphasized, is a key signal of nearing the end of earthly incarnations. Life becomes less about repayment and more about demonstration. Instead of heavy cycles of repeating pain, the experiences begin to shift. Lessons arrive not as debts but as opportunities to express mastery. Someone in this stage might face hardship, but they walk through it with peace rather than bitterness. They no longer carry the feeling that they are chained to destiny. Cayce considered this a profound sign of soul maturity, the awareness that nothing is owed, only expressed. And yet, perhaps the most decisive sign of all, the one that Cayce repeated in different words throughout decades of trance work, is the sincere and continual seeking of the divine will above personal will. He reminded people again and again that the true measure of spiritual progress is not mystical experiences, visions, or even knowledge of past lives. It is the daily surrender to God's guidance. In Virginia Beach, during one of his most referenced sessions, he told a woman, "Not my will, but thine, O Lord, be done in me through me." For Cayce, a soul that lives by this prayer, not once but continually, is demonstrating the ultimate readiness to graduate from Earth's classroom. This fifth sign is both the simplest and the most difficult. It requires humility, trust, and the courage to release control. Those who embody it are not passive. They work, they serve, they love. But in every action, there is an inner question. Is this what God desires through me? According to Cayce, when the answer to that question becomes the compass of your life, reincarnation may no longer be necessary. The soul has learned to align its individual purpose with the eternal purpose of the Creator. Now let's pause for a moment. If you've been listening carefully, you might have recognized pieces of your own journey reflected in these signs. Maybe you've felt the pull away from ego and into service. Maybe you've noticed that your old grudges no longer have the same hold. Or perhaps you've begun asking that powerful question about God's will more often than before. This does not mean you can be certain that this is your last life. Cayce was clear that free will remains until the end. But it does mean that your soul is moving closer to that threshold. And even if you are not at the final chapter yet, every step in that direction brings more freedom, more peace, and more love into your present life. But here is what nobody expected. Cayce also gave a warning. He said that souls near the end of reincarnation face temptations unlike any before. The closer you are to graduation, the more subtle the distractions. It is not about obvious sins or crimes. It is about pride, spiritual superiority, and the temptation to believe you are finished. In one of his sessions during the post-war years, Cayce explained that the greatest danger for advanced souls was not failure, but self-deception. Believing you have arrived can block you from the very humility needed to cross the finish line. So even in this final stage, vigilance is required. This teaching is sobering and liberating at the same time. It reminds us that the signs are not trophies to collect, but mirrors to examine. They are invitations, not guarantees. Your life today, the way you treat others, the way you align with God, that is the real evidence of your progress. And Cayce's readings remain a guide not to predict an end, but to help us live fully in the present. When we step back and look at these 5 signs together, we begin to see not only individual markers, but a portrait of the soul's evolution. For Cayce, this was never abstract. Each reading was given to a real person in a real situation: an anxious mother during the Great Depression, a wounded soldier's family during the war, or a seeker who traveled to Virginia Beach in search of answers. What strikes us is how consistent the guidance was across these decades. Spiritual maturity reveals itself in alignment, compassion, unity, karmic balance, and surrender to divine will. These patterns are preserved today in the archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, where anyone can study the transcripts without the need for speculation. Take, for example, a reading Cayce gave in Hopkinsville, his hometown in Kentucky, where a family asked why their lives seemed to repeat the same tragedies. His answer was not about punishment, but about growth. He explained that they were still working through unresolved patterns of pride and resentment carried from earlier incarnations. But he added a hopeful note. Once those lessons are embraced and transformed, the cycle breaks. This echoes directly into the concept of the 4th sign, karmic resolution. What seems like endless repetition eventually shifts into liberation when the lesson is truly learned. For those listening right now, perhaps the most practical question is, what do I do if I recognize myself in these signs? Cayce's advice was both profound and simple. He urged people not to obsess about whether this was their last life, but to live each day as if it could be. Be faithful in the little things, he once said, and you will be ruler over much. For him, the daily act of forgiveness, the choice to serve without expecting reward, the habit of prayerful alignment, these were not small gestures. They were the very steps that brought a soul closer to completion. And here is where Cayce's message feels so relevant for us today. In a time of global uncertainty, when technology, politics, and culture pull us in conflicting directions, these 5 signs are like a compass pointing north. They remind us that the measure of our lives is not in how much we accumulate, but in how much we integrate, how deeply we love, and how sincerely we surrender. Whether or not this is your final incarnation, living with these values creates a life of meaning right now. But the mystery deepens. In several readings, Cayce suggested that souls often sense when they are near the end of their cycle. Not in dramatic visions, but in quiet intuitions, a feeling of, "I've been here before," or an unshakable peace in the face of challenges. He described these as the whispers of the soul recognizing that it no longer needs to repeat old lessons. For some, it manifests as a longing for home that no earthly place can satisfy. For others, it emerges as a clarity that material success will never define them. These subtle experiences, Cayce explained, are part of the transition toward graduation. It is worth noting that Cayce's teachings were never meant to create fear. He did not want people to worry about missing their last chance. On the contrary, his entire body of work was built on the foundation of hope. That every soul is moving forward, that no lesson is wasted, and that even if another life is needed, it will only serve to bring us closer to the source. In his words, no soul is ever lost. Each finds its way home sooner or later. This perspective changes everything. Instead of living under pressure, we live with purpose. Instead of fearing reincarnation, we embrace each moment as part of a divine curriculum. And if it happens that this is your last life, then you are already being prepared by the very experiences you are going through now. That preparation is not somewhere else, it is here, in the way you forgive, in the way you serve, in the way you open yourself to God's will. What happens after the last incarnation? Cayce was careful with this question. He suggested that the soul moves into higher realms of consciousness, where physical bodies are no longer required. Some of his descriptions pointed to dimensions of light and harmony, places where souls work not through pain, but through creative expression and communion with God. He often called this state at-one-ment, a complete awareness of unity with the Creator. For him, this was the destiny of every soul, not just the select few, but here is what no one expected. Some of Cayce's most powerful insights on the soul's final incarnation did not come in dramatic prophecies, but in ordinary consultations where people were simply searching for relief. In one session that forever changed a family's life, he told a mother that her son's mysterious illness was not a curse nor random misfortune. It was the final step of his soul working through a lingering imbalance from centuries before. Yet he added, "This is not for punishment, but for completion." That word, completion, captures the essence of the last life. It is not about escaping Earth. It is about finishing what was begun long ago with grace and with love. During the war years of the 1940s, Cayce was overwhelmed with requests. Soldiers' families, desperate for hope, came to him for answers. In more than one case, he explained that certain young men were incarnated not to settle debts, but to be examples of courage that would inspire generations. These readings highlight the shift he described. When karma is balanced, life becomes less about what you take and more about what you give. This teaching is preserved in the ARE archives, and when you read those transcripts, the words feel alive even now. One of the most arresting phrases Cayce ever uttered in trance was this: "The last life is not marked by ease, but by peace." This shocked many who assumed that reaching the end meant a life free of struggle. Instead, Cayce explained, the difference is in the soul's response. While challenges still come, the person no longer fights against them with bitterness. They carry an inner calm that cannot be shaken. Think about that for a moment. Peace in the midst of storms. Not because life became easy, but because the soul has grown beyond fear. And here's something crucial. Cayce also warned that advanced souls are often misunderstood. Their detachment can look like indifference. Their peace can be mistaken for weakness. Their surrender can appear as passivity. But in reality, these are the qualities of mastery. They are not disengaged. They are engaged in a higher way, seeing beyond appearances. If you have ever felt that others cannot understand why you live the way you do, it may not be a flaw. It may be a sign that your soul has reached a different stage of the journey. Imagine for a moment standing in Virginia Beach in the 1930s, entering the modest house where Cayce gave most of his readings. Families traveled from across the nation, often with little money, just for a chance to hear what the sleeping prophet would say. In that small room, lives were changed, and among those thousands of readings, patterns emerged that point us to these 5 signs. This is not abstract theory. It is history, documented and preserved. When we speak of the last life, we are speaking of something grounded in real moments, real people, and real words Cayce spoke under trance. Now let's turn this reflection back to you. Perhaps you recognize elements of these signs in your own life. Perhaps you feel that deep pull toward unity, or you've noticed your priorities shifting from ambition to compassion. Maybe you have begun to release grudges more easily, or you find yourself asking more often what God wants rather than what you want. If so, Cayce would say, take courage. This is not proof of your last life, but it is evidence that your soul is progressing exactly as it should. And here's the pattern interrupt that keeps many awake at night. What if you are closer than you think? What if the challenges you are facing right now are not setbacks, but the very final exams of your soul's earthly education? Seen through this lens, every difficulty becomes meaningful. Every act of love becomes eternal. Every surrender to God's will becomes a step toward home. This is what Cayce meant when he said, life is purposeful. No experience is wasted. So what does it truly mean if this is your last life? According to Edgar Cayce, it is not an escape from responsibility, but the ultimate embrace of it. A soul in its final incarnation is here not to withdraw from the world, but to shine within it. It comes not to take, but to give. It carries peace, but not passivity, humility, but not weakness, compassion, but not control. These qualities, Cayce insisted, are the real markers of maturity. And when they appear consistently, it may mean that the soul is nearing the end of its earthly journey. Cayce also spoke of what comes after. He described dimensions of light, realms of creative harmony, places where the soul participates in God's work, not through struggle but through expression. He often used the word at-one-ment, the complete awareness of being one with the Creator. Imagine a state where there are no enemies, no debts, no fear. A state where every thought is a prayer, every act an expression of divine love. For Cayce, this was the destiny of every soul. Whether it takes one more life or many, this is where we are all headed. But let us not forget his warning. The closer a soul gets to completion, the more subtle the temptations. Pride, superiority, and the illusion of being finished can become traps. This is why humility is so central to the last life. Not the false humility of denying your gifts, but the true humility of using those gifts in service, while remembering that all comes from God. Cayce made it clear. In him, we live and move and have our being. Without that anchor, even the most advanced soul can lose direction. With it, the journey reaches its fulfillment. Think of your own path for a moment. Perhaps you are beginning to sense that material success will never satisfy you. Perhaps you feel a longing for home that no place on earth can fill. Perhaps you notice that your first instinct in conflict is no longer to fight, but to forgive. These are not small things. They are signs of transformation. They are whispers from the soul that you are moving closer to completion. And whether this is your last life or not, the way you live today shapes eternity. In the end, Cayce's message was never about fear. It was about freedom. Freedom from cycles of resentment, freedom from the chains of pride, freedom from the endless pursuit of things that do not last. He invited us to step into a higher way of being, where love becomes natural, service becomes joy, and surrender becomes strength. That is the real meaning of the last life, not the end, but the beginning of living fully in God. And now, I turn the question to you. Which of these 5 signs do you recognize in your own journey? Do you feel the shift from ambition to compassion? Have you tasted the peace that no circumstance can shake? Or do you feel the subtle pull towards surrender to something greater than yourself? Share your reflection in the comments below. I will be reading each one and marking them with a heart, because this is more than a video. It is a community of souls walking together. Before you go, if this message touched you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need this hope, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelation from Cayce's extraordinary legacy. Together, we will keep exploring the mysteries of the soul, the wisdom of the sleeping prophet, and the path that leads us all home. Did you know that every single night, while your body rests, your soul travels to dimensions you can't even imagine? This revelation, documented by Edgar Cayce in over 14,000 psychic readings and confirmed by decades of research at the Association for Research and Enlightenment, will completely change your perspective on death, sleep, and reincarnation. If you've ever felt like your dreams were too real, or woken up with the sensation of having lived another life, leave in the comments what strange experiences you've had during sleep, because what I'm about to reveal today could explain everything. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 3 shocking truths. First, the documented case that led Edgar Cayce to reveal the secrets of soul separation during sleep. Second, how Cayce's readings from 1923 to 1944 codified these experiences in thousands of documented sessions. And third, a technique that Cayce himself used to consciously access these spiritual planes while sleeping. When Edgar Cayce began his extraordinary work as the sleeping prophet in Kentucky, one of the first revelations he received, while in his famous trance state, was about the dual nature of human beings. We are not just this physical body we see in the mirror every morning. We are soul, we are spirit, and we have a subtle body that acts as an intermediary between our consciousness and dense matter. But wait, because what I'm about to tell you about this astral body is going to change everything you thought you knew about death and sleep. During deep sleep, our astral body partially separates from the physical body. It's like we're a balloon tied by a golden cord that never breaks while we're incarnated. This separation isn't random. It's necessary for our spiritual evolution. While our body repairs cells and processes information, our soul travels to spiritual planes to receive teachings, meet with spirit guides, and in many cases, work on missions to help other souls. Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in history with over 14,000 readings, transcribed and verified, described hundreds of cases where people experienced these nightly soul journeys. In his readings on dreams and sleep, specifically reading 5754-2, Cayce detailed how incarnated souls visit spiritual realms during sleep to participate in learning and service activities. Here's where things get really interesting, and in 3 minutes I'm going to tell you about the case that shocked even the most skeptical researchers in America. One of Cayce's most extraordinary revelations came during reading 294-136, where he specifically addressed what happens to the soul during sleep. According to Cayce, during sleep the soul partially regains its freedom, can communicate with other souls, and receive teachings that often manifest as intuitions or inspirations upon waking. This explains why so many people have solved complex problems after sleeping on it, or why some wake up with brilliant ideas that seemed impossible the day before. It's not coincidence, it's the soul working on higher planes while the body rests. But let me tell you something that will give you chills about how this process really works. Edgar Cayce developed the ability to consciously access these separation states during his famous readings. During his psychic sessions, Cayce would enter a self-induced deep sleep, where his soul traveled to what he called the Akashic records to obtain information about past lives, healings, and predictions. What's fascinating is that his descriptions of these astral journeys were consistently verified by independent researchers and medical professionals. Remember, I promised you the case that shocked the researchers. Here it is. In 1942, Edgar Cayce gave a reading for a woman named Helen Ellington, who had been experiencing vivid dreams of deceased relatives. During reading 136-18, Cayce's unconscious mind described how Helen's soul was actually visiting her departed family members in what he called borderland realms during her sleep. The incredible part was that Helen's sister, who was dying in a hospital in another state, later confirmed that she had seen Helen visit her in dreams on the exact dates and times described in Cayce's reading, even though the sisters hadn't spoken in months. But this is just the beginning, because what I'm about to reveal about reincarnation and these astral travels will change your understanding of divine justice forever. During these nightly separations, many souls take the opportunity to visit places and people from previous lives. It's not spiritual nostalgia. It's part of the karmic healing process. According to Cayce's readings, some souls need to seek forgiveness, others need to forgive, and many work actively to repair damage caused in previous incarnations. Dr. Gina Sermonara, who extensively studied Cayce's work and wrote Many Mansions, explained in her research how these sleep encounters could be fundamental to healing psychological traumas that seem to have no apparent cause. People suffering from unexplained phobias, or those who feel immediate affinities with certain places or people, might be reliving memories of these nightly astral encounters. Wait, because what's coming next about spiritual obsessions during sleep is something everyone should know. Not all separations during sleep are harmonious. According to Cayce's readings, less evolved souls can take advantage of these moments of vulnerability to exert negative influences. This is why some people experience recurring nightmares, sleep paralysis, or wake up feeling more tired than when they went to bed. Edgar Cayce, in reading 5D754-1, explained how prayer and moral elevation act as protective shields during these separations. An evolved soul attracts superior spiritual companions, while lower thoughts can magnetize less developed entities. Here's where a practical technique comes in that will change your nights forever, and I'll teach it to you in exactly 2 minutes. Cayce documented the case of a man named David Kahn, who suffered constant night terrors. During reading 137-125, Cayce revealed that Kahn was being influenced during sleep by the spirit of a business partner he had wronged in a previous life. Only after Kahn made amends through meditation and sending loving thoughts to this entity did the nightmares completely cease. This case, documented in the ARE archives in Virginia Beach, demonstrates how conflicts from past lives extend into the spiritual realm. The protection technique is surprisingly simple, but powerful. Before sleeping, according to Cayce's readings and the experiences documented by the ARE, we should elevate our thoughts through sincere prayer, asking for protection from our spirit guides and mentally programming the type of experiences we want to have during separation. Cayce used a similar technique before each reading session, stating his intention to be helpful and to only access information that could assist others. This mental programming acts as a spiritual magnet, attracting only superior influences during the separation state. But there's something deeper about these astral travels that directly connects to the law of cause and effect, and this will explain why some people seem to have luck while others face constant obstacles. During sleep, many souls actively work on repairing their karmic debts. They visit spirits they hurt in previous lives, participate in spiritual charity work, or receive teachings that prepare them for future challenges. This is the true nighttime school of the soul, where learning continues even when physical consciousness rests. Dr. Harmon Brough, who personally worked with Edgar Cayce and documented his methods, explained how many creative insights, innovative solutions, and brilliant intuitions are actually fragmented memories of teachings received during these nightly journeys. It's not the brain creating, it's the soul remembering. Here comes the part that will really impact your understanding of death and what happens after. According to the spirits that communicated through Cayce's readings, the transition called death is simply the definitive continuation of what we already experience every night during sleep. The difference is that in death, the silver cord that connects the astral body to the physical body finally breaks, completely freeing the spirit. This is why many newly deceased spirits initially don't realize they've died. They continue experiencing the same freedom of movement and consciousness they had during nightly separations, but now without the need to return to the physical body. In reading 5756-4, Cayce described in detail how deceased spirits often visit their living family members during the latter's sleep, creating emotional encounters that manifest as vivid or prophetic dreams. But wait, because what I'm about to reveal about preparations for reincarnation will completely change your perspective on life's difficulties. During these nightly astral travels, souls preparing to reincarnate often visit the families where they'll be born, meet the spirits who will be their parents, siblings, or life companions. It's not cosmic coincidence. It's careful spiritual planning supervised by evolved spiritual mentors. Edgar Cayce, in readings 57532 through 57536, received detailed revelations about how souls choose their reincarnation challenges. Often during sleep in the current life, we visit these planning sessions where we review our progress and adjust our commitments for the next incarnation. This explains why some people feel immediate affinities with certain places, cultures, or activities. It's not just personal preference. These are soul memories of commitments made on spiritual planes during these nightly encounters. Cayce, in his past life readings, frequently described how natural talents and irresistible vocations were the result of specific preparations made in the intervals between incarnations, many of which were planned during the nightly separations of previous lives. Now let me tell you about the most shocking case Cayce documented about communication during sleep, a case that was investigated and confirmed by skeptical journalists. In 1934, Edgar Cayce gave reading 294-192 for a young woman whose fiancé had died in a car accident. During the reading, Cayce described how the deceased man's soul had been visiting his fiancée during her sleep in the nights following his death to comfort her and explain his transition. The remarkable part was that the woman had documented in her diary vivid dreams of her fiancé on the exact dates mentioned in Cayce's reading. Dreams where he appeared peaceful and told her he was safe in a beautiful place of learning. This case, documented in Thomas Sugrew's biography There Is a River, demonstrates how communication between dimensions occurs naturally during separation states, for both the living and the deceased. But here's the revelation that will change your nightly routine forever. You can develop consciousness of these astral travels. The technique, taught through Cayce's readings and successfully practiced by thousands of ARE members, involves 3 fundamental steps. First, daily mental and moral purification, because only elevated souls can consciously access higher planes. Second, pre-sleep programming with specific intentions for learning and service. Third, developing the ability to remember through a dream journal and morning meditation. Dr. Henry Reed, who conducted extensive research on Cayce's dream work at Princeton University, documented cases of people who, following these principles, began remembering participation in healing work during sleep, study sessions in spiritual realms, and encounters with deceased mentors who provided guidance for physical life challenges. We're not talking about fantasy or autosuggestion. We're talking about recovering a natural capacity of the spirit that was temporarily dormant due to the needs of incarnation. Here's something that will explain why some people wake up with brilliant solutions while others never experience this. The quality of our nightly separations is directly related to our level of spiritual evolution and our intentions. A selfish, materialistic soul, or one charged with lower vibrations, remains tied to the denser layers of the astral plane, where less evolved souls and conflict situations predominate. Conversely, souls dedicated to the common good, spiritual study, and service to others naturally and automatically elevate to more subtle regions, where they encounter spiritual masters, astral libraries, and opportunities to participate in spiritual assistance missions. Cayce documented multiple accounts in his readings of people who participated during their incarnations in nightly work helping earthbound souls, teaching confused spirits, and assisting recently deceased individuals. This work, performed during sleep separation, represented true extensions of their charitable and spiritual activities during waking hours. But wait, because what I'm about to reveal about spiritual realms and their relationship to our dreams will explain experiences you may have lived but never understood. In readings 57543 and 900-348, Edgar Cayce described the existence of entire spiritual cities dedicated to the learning and evolution of souls. These realms aren't metaphors, they're realities of the astral plane where millions of souls live, study, and work on their evolutionary progress. During our nightly separations, we frequently visit these realms to participate in courses, seminars, and service activities. Many people wake with fragmented memories of having been in beautiful places with impossible architecture, participating in educational activities or helping others. These aren't ordinary dreams, they're memories of real experiences on spiritual planes. Cayce described similar experiences in his readings, reporting nightly visits to what he called universities of the soul, where he received information about healing, philosophy, and spiritual evolution that he later channeled in his psychic readings. Here's the practical technique you can start using tonight to improve the quality of your astral experiences. Before sleeping, after your usual prayer, specifically visualize the type of experience you want to have. If you seek emotional healing, ask to be taken to realms specialized in spiritual therapy. If you need guidance for an important decision, request meetings with your spiritual mentors. If you want to contribute to the common good, offer yourself to participate in work helping souls in need. The visualization should be accompanied by sincere and selfless intention. Higher planes don't respond to merely intellectual curiosity or selfish desires, but open generously to souls who genuinely seek to evolve and serve. Hugh Lynn Cayce, Edgar's son who directed the ARE for decades, explained that this pre-sleep programming acts like radio tuning, directing our spiritual vibration to frequencies that correspond to our highest intentions. Now let me tell you something that will completely change your understanding of why some people seem to have easier lives, while others face constant obstacles. During nightly separations, many souls actively work on resolving karmic conflicts. They visit spirits they hurt in previous lives to ask forgiveness, find victims of their past mistakes to repair damage, or participate in situations where they can demonstrate they've learned lessons from painful experiences. This nightly work of karmic repair can dramatically accelerate our spiritual evolution and significantly improve the conditions of our physical life. Problems that might need multiple incarnations to resolve can be solved in years or even months through this conscious astral work. Edgar Cayce, in his readings on the law of cause and effect, explained how sincere repentance and active repair can modify the consequences of our past mistakes. Nightly separations provide unique opportunities for this direct repair with the souls involved. But here comes the most shocking revelation about how you can use this knowledge to transform not just your current life, but your future spiritual destiny. Every night you have the opportunity to accelerate your spiritual evolution in ways that would be impossible during physical waking alone. While your body repairs cells and processes memories, your soul can be participating in cosmic universities, healing traumas from past lives, developing psychic abilities, and accumulating spiritual merits through selfless service. The ARE archives contain the documented case of a woman named Gladys Davis, Cayce's longtime secretary, who for over 20 years consciously participated in nightly healing work in spiritual realms. This astral work not only extraordinarily developed her psychic abilities, but provided her with knowledge about spiritual psychology and healing techniques that she later applied with great success in her earthly activities. The key is understanding that we're not passive victims of our destiny. We're active co-creators of our evolution, and nightly separations represent daily opportunities for accelerated progress that most people waste through ignorance. Edgar Cayce used this understanding to develop extraordinary abilities for healing and clairvoyance. Before each reading session, he programmed his astral separation to access specific information in the Akashic records, where the entire history of the universe and every soul is stored. Here's the advanced technique that can completely transform your relationship with sleep and accelerate your spiritual evolution in extraordinary ways. Begin by keeping a detailed dream journal. Don't just note what you remember, but also the emotions, sensations, and insights that accompany your nightly experiences. Patterns will begin to emerge that reveal your recurring astral activities. Second, develop a nightly preparation ritual that includes meditation, prayer, and specific programming of intentions. Visualize places of light where you want to be, spiritual people with whom you want to learn, and types of service you want to perform. Third, practice vibration-raising techniques during the day. Charity, forgiveness, spiritual study, and constant prayer elevate your vibrational pattern, allowing access to more subtle planes during nightly separations. Finally, cultivate gratitude for every nightly experience. Even those you don't consciously remember, your soul is working, learning, and evolving every night, regardless of your physical memory. What you've just discovered represents only a small fraction of the spiritual mysteries documented by Edgar Cayce and revealed through decades of research at the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Every night that passes without consciously taking advantage of these evolution opportunities is a lost opportunity for accelerated spiritual progress. Your soul already travels, already learns, already works during sleep. The difference lies in developing consciousness of these activities and intentionally directing them toward your maximum spiritual growth and service to others. Sleep will never again be simply physical rest. It will be your nightly university, your spiritual evolution laboratory, and your daily opportunity to consciously participate in the great work of universal progress that connects all souls on their journey toward perfection. Have you ever wondered if there is a frequency so powerful, so transformative, that it could align your mind, body, and soul with the very presence of Christ himself? This is not a metaphor or an empty phrase. It is the exact language Edgar Cayce used when describing what he called the vibrational frequency of Christ consciousness. In one of his most striking readings during the early 1930s, at the height of the Great Depression, Cayce spoke of this frequency as something real, tangible, and accessible to anyone willing to attune their inner life to higher spiritual laws. He did not speak in vague symbols. He spoke with clarity, urging people who came to him, ordinary men and women from across America, from Virginia Beach to New York, to see that the mind could literally vibrate in harmony with the universal Christ. And here's the question I want you to reflect on right now. If Christ consciousness is truly a vibration, how do you know whether you are tuned into it or missing it completely? During a session that profoundly impacted a family facing despair, Cayce explained that every thought creates a frequency. Just as radio waves fill the air unseen, our inner lives are constantly radiating signals into the universe. The startling revelation was this: when we hold thoughts of love, compassion, and service, we are not just being good. We are tuning into the exact wavelength of Christ consciousness. In contrast, thoughts of fear, anger, or selfishness disrupt the connection, much like static on a radio dial. The analogy shocked many who heard it at the time, because Cayce wasn't offering a mystical escape from reality. He was giving a practical, scientific-like explanation of why inner transformation is essential. And what happened next in that same reading surprised everyone present. Cayce declared that the highest healing possible, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, comes only when the soul aligns with that Christ vibration. Think about that. People traveled from all over the country, some desperate for cures doctors could not provide, others searching for meaning in a time of economic collapse and uncertainty. In Virginia Beach, as Cayce lay in his self-induced trance, his voice would describe conditions of the body and prescriptions for healing. But in the middle of what seemed like ordinary health readings, he would suddenly pause and say something that left the room in silence. Unless the body and the mind are attuned to the Christ vibration, no true healing can occur. For those who expected only medical advice, this was shocking. Yet again and again, Cayce insisted that without spiritual harmony, physical remedies could only go so far. The Christ frequency was the missing link, and once it was activated, lives began to transform. One of the most profound patterns in Cayce's work is how he wove together the language of spirituality and science. During the years of war, when families were desperate for reassurance, Cayce explained that the Christ vibration was not about belonging to a church or repeating a creed. It was about the resonance of the soul with divine truth. He described it in almost physical terms. Like electricity flowing through wires, the divine presence flows through human beings when they open themselves to love and service. He spoke of vibrations not as mystical fantasies, but as forces as real as gravity. And this is where Cayce's teaching becomes so urgent for us today, because if every thought and every act shifts our frequency, then at every moment we are either moving closer to Christ consciousness or further away from it. And that realization can change everything about the way you live, the way you love, and the way you see the world. In one of his readings during the early 1940s, at a time when the entire world was caught in the uncertainty of war, Cayce gave instructions that went far beyond traditional prayer. He explained that true prayer was not simply asking for something, nor was it limited to words repeated in ritual. Instead, he said prayer works when the vibration of the mind is lifted to meet the vibration of Christ. He described this state as an alignment where the soul resonates like a tuning fork struck by divine energy. Meditation, according to Cayce, was the gateway to this state. It wasn't about escaping the world or forcing the mind to be silent. It was about opening a channel where the Christ frequency could flow freely through the body. Those who practiced this consistently reported not only peace of mind, but physical healing, improved relationships, and a sense of purpose that carried them through the darkest times. The implication was clear. Christ consciousness was not a distant ideal, but a present reality that anyone could touch if they learned to harmonize their vibration. During a session that forever marked the memory of those present, Cayce told a man suffering from chronic illness that no medicine would ever bring lasting relief until his inner life shifted. The man had spent years focusing on fear and resentment, and Cayce gently but firmly explained that these emotions created a barrier, a static that kept him from receiving the Christ frequency. What shocked the listeners was when Cayce then described exactly how to reverse the condition: by daily prayer of gratitude, by acts of kindness, and by meditating on the life of Christ, not as history, but as living presence. Within months, reports came back of remarkable improvement, not just physically, but in the man's entire outlook on life. Stories like these spread quickly, and it became impossible to ignore that Cayce's message was not only about diagnosing disease, but about transforming vibration. This is where Cayce's perspective challenged even the most skeptical observers. Scientists and doctors of his era dismissed the idea that thought could affect the body in such dramatic ways, yet time after time the evidence grew. Families in Hopkinsville and Virginia Beach testified that when they followed Cayce's guidance to align their vibration with love and compassion, healings occurred that defied medical expectation. Some called it faith healing, but Cayce resisted such labels. He insisted it was law, spiritual law working as reliably as physical law. Just as a radio picks up a station only when it is tuned to the right frequency, the soul receives healing and divine guidance only when it is tuned to Christ consciousness. Anything less, he warned, would leave people searching endlessly for answers that never satisfy. But here is where the teaching becomes even more profound. Cayce revealed that the Christ vibration was not reserved for saints or mystics. It was the destiny of every soul. He explained that throughout lifetimes the soul evolves, each choice either raising or lowering its vibration. And the highest calling of every soul, no matter where they are born or what religion they follow, is to eventually align with Christ consciousness. This is why Cayce often reminded his listeners that Jesus was not only the Christ, but the example, the pattern, showing humanity what is possible when one lives in perfect resonance with divine frequency. To Cayce, Christ consciousness was not limited by dogma. It was the universal law of love, truth, and service, and this truth is still as radical today as it was when first spoken in those quiet rooms in Virginia Beach, with only a handful of witnesses taking careful notes. As the years went on, Cayce began to connect this teaching about vibration not only to individual healing, but to the destiny of humanity itself. In several sessions, he explained that the world was entering a period of great change, and that the survival of civilization depended on whether people could learn to raise their collective frequency. He spoke of America, during the years of the Second World War, as having a special role, not because of political power or wealth, but because it was a land where spiritual freedom could flourish. He warned, however, that if the nation failed to embody the Christ vibration in its institutions, communities, and daily lives, it would face inner decay, regardless of external victories. This was not patriotic rhetoric. It was a spiritual call to responsibility. He saw America as a testing ground for whether humanity could embody Christ consciousness in real life, not just in words. Cayce's predictions were often striking, and many of them became points of fascination decades later. He foresaw that materialism, unchecked greed, and the neglect of spiritual laws would bring immense suffering, if not balanced by a return to higher vibration. And here's what startled many who studied his readings. He described vibrational shifts, not just in human consciousness, but in the very earth itself. He linked natural disasters, climate disturbances, and social upheaval to the collective state of human vibration. According to Cayce, when masses of people live in fear, anger, or selfishness, the earth resonates with turbulence. When communities shift toward compassion, service, and unity, harmony is restored. This idea, that even the planet responds to human consciousness, was so radical that it shocked his contemporaries, but it is now echoed in modern discussions about energy, resonance, and collective intention. During one memorable session, a questioner asked Cayce about the future of humanity. His response was clear. The only hope for true peace lies in aligning with Christ consciousness. He described it as a global vibration, a wave of light that will eventually sweep through the earth, transforming how humans relate to each other and to God. He explained that wars, divisions, and hatred are symptoms of being out of tune, while peace is the natural state of those who have harmonized with the Christ frequency. What no one expected was how boldly he said it. Christ consciousness is the destiny of the earth. Imagine hearing those words in the middle of the 20th century, when the world was burning in conflict. They carried not only comfort, but also a challenge. The question was no longer whether one believed in Christ as a historical figure, but whether one was willing to vibrate with his consciousness here and now. This message resonates even more strongly today. Modern science has begun exploring the effects of meditation, intention, and collective focus on measurable outcomes. Studies in physics and biology are slowly catching up to what Cayce declared decades earlier, that consciousness is not passive, but vibrational, and that it has power to shape reality. Yet Cayce's voice still cuts deeper than scientific data. He called people not just to experiment with meditation, but to live in such a way that every choice, every thought, every act becomes an expression of the Christ frequency. For him, this was the path of human evolution, the journey of the soul across lifetimes, and the purpose of existence itself. Cayce often reminded those who came to him that raising one's vibration was not a mysterious process reserved for the spiritually gifted. Instead, it was a matter of daily choices. He explained that every thought is a seed, every action a vibration, and every emotion a signal sent into the universe. In one remarkable session, he emphasized that even the smallest gesture, a kind word to a stranger, an act of forgiveness, a silent prayer of gratitude, could shift the entire frequency of the soul. He compared it to striking a single note on a piano. While one note may seem insignificant, it changes the harmony of the entire song. To Cayce, this meant that each of us carries the power to elevate not only our own lives, but also the collective vibration of humanity through consistent choices of love, patience, and compassion. Meditation was one of the key practices Cayce recommended, but he warned against approaching it mechanically, as if simply sitting still would create transformation. Instead, he insisted that meditation must be directed toward a clear purpose, aligning with the Christ vibration. He described the mind as a lens, and meditation as the act of focusing that lens on divine truth. When properly directed, it allowed the soul to receive guidance, healing, and renewal. He urged his followers to begin each day with a moment of centering, turning thoughts consciously toward Christ consciousness before entering the challenges of work, family, and society. Over time, he said, this daily alignment would become second nature, raising the baseline vibration of one's life and allowing the Christ frequency to flow more freely. Prayer, too, was central. Yet Cayce challenged the traditional view of prayer as asking God for favors. He explained that true prayer is the vibration of the soul in harmony with divine will. When we pray in love and surrender, we are not convincing God to change circumstances. We are changing our own vibration so that divine energy can flow into our lives. This is why some prayers seem to go unanswered, Cayce said, because the vibration from which they are offered is one of fear, desperation, or doubt. But when prayer is lifted in faith, gratitude, and love, it automatically aligns with Christ consciousness, and the results can be profound. He told people to pray not only for themselves but for others, for communities, even for the world, because each prayer raises the frequency of the entire human family. And this is where Cayce's teaching becomes deeply practical. He insisted that Christ consciousness is not found in extraordinary visions or mystical ecstasies, but in daily living. In a time when people expected spirituality to be distant or abstract, he brought it down to earth. He urged a mother struggling in Virginia Beach to show patience with her children as an act of tuning into Christ. He told a businessman in New York that honesty in his dealings was a way of living the Christ vibration. He reminded farmers in Kentucky that the care they showed for the land was part of the same harmony. For Cayce, spirituality was not separate from ordinary life. It was revealed in the ordinary. The Christ frequency, he said, was available in every moment, if only we would choose to attune ourselves to it. Cayce often looked beyond the individual, speaking of how generations yet unborn would be shaped by the choices made in his time and in ours. He foresaw that humanity was approaching a crossroads, a period of testing when the collective vibration of the planet would either rise toward Christ consciousness or fall into turmoil. During readings in the 1930s and 1940s, he warned that materialism and selfish ambition would lead to instability on a global scale. Yet he also promised that if enough individuals attuned themselves to the Christ vibration, the world could experience a transformation unlike anything before, a new era of spiritual awakening. He described this shift not as a sudden miracle, but as a gradual tuning, like an orchestra learning to play in harmony after years of discord. Humanity, he said, had to learn to vibrate together at a higher frequency. In one session that left a powerful mark on those who preserved the transcript, Cayce explained that children born in future decades would carry within them a heightened sensitivity to vibration. He spoke of souls entering the earth plane with memories closer to the divine, prepared to help lead humanity into a new consciousness. These children, he said, would not simply inherit the world, they would embody the Christ vibration in ways that challenge older generations to rise higher. The responsibility then was clear. Parents, communities, and nations must create conditions that nurture love, compassion, and truth so these souls could thrive. To ignore this responsibility would be to delay humanity's destiny. Cayce also spoke of prophecy in terms of vibration. He explained that no prediction was set in stone because the frequency of human thought and action could alter the future. This was radical. At a time when most people saw prophecy as a fixed blueprint, Cayce insisted it was conditional, shaped by the choices we make together. He often said, Mind is the builder, meaning that what we collectively dwell upon creates the reality we step into. If humanity clings to fear and division, wars and disasters would follow. But if enough people anchor themselves in Christ consciousness, even the most dire outcomes could be transformed. This teaching turned prophecy into a call to responsibility, not fatalism. What strikes many modern readers is how Cayce's vision seems to echo current challenges. Social unrest, environmental crises, and technological upheaval mirror the turbulence he associated with low vibration. Yet, within that turbulence lies the opportunity for awakening. Cayce taught that crises often force humanity to choose, remain trapped in static, or rise into harmony. He urged his followers to see these challenges not as punishments, but as invitations. Every war, every disaster, every division is a chance for humanity to remember what it means to vibrate with Christ. And the promise he left us is extraordinary. When even a small group of people sincerely align with Christ consciousness, their collective vibration can shift entire communities, even nations. In his final years, Cayce became even more direct about the destiny of the soul. He explained that every lifetime, every lesson, every trial was ultimately preparing the spirit for one purpose: to live fully in the vibration of Christ consciousness. He described this state as the natural home of the soul, the place where separation dissolves and unity with God is restored. For Cayce, Christ was not only a historical figure, but the living pattern of what each of us is called to become. He urged people not to think of this as an unreachable goal, but as the inevitable direction of our evolution. No matter how many lifetimes it takes, no matter how many mistakes are made along the way, the journey of every soul is to vibrate with the frequency of love, truth, and service that is Christ. What startled many of his followers was Cayce's insistence that this journey was not just personal but collective. He said the earth itself was designed as a school where souls learn to resonate with divine frequency. The turbulence of history, the struggles of nations, even the challenges of families, all of these were the lessons of vibration. He reminded people that the Christ frequency is not bound to religion, creed, or culture. It is universal law, available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and he left no doubt about its importance. Only when humanity as a whole learns to live in this vibration will true peace be possible. Wars will cease, divisions will heal, and the earth will reflect the harmony of heaven. Until then, the invitation remains before us every day. As we reflect on Cayce's words, the challenge is simple yet profound. Are we willing to live as if every thought carries vibration? Are we ready to take responsibility for the frequency we send into the world? It begins in silence, in prayer, in meditation, in the choice to forgive, in the courage to love. It continues in how we treat each other, how we build communities, and how we face the crises of our time. And it culminates in the collective realization that Christ consciousness is not a dream, but a destiny. The power to align with it is in your hands right now, in this very moment. So let me leave you with this. If Cayce was right, then the future of your life and of humanity depends on the vibration you choose today. Will you resonate with fear and division or with love and truth? That decision, repeated moment by moment, shapes everything. If this message has touched your soul, I invite you to join this community by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your reflections in the comments. Tell us, where are you watching from and what part of Cayce's teaching about Christ consciousness spoke to you most deeply? I promise to read and heart every comment. Together, let's raise our vibration and step closer to the destiny Cayce described. A world transformed by the frequency of Christ. You wake up exhausted. 8 hours in bed, but you feel like you haven't slept at all. Your body is heavy, your mind foggy, and you wonder why rest doesn't feel restful anymore. What if I told you that according to Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, you're not really resting at all? In fact, every single night your soul leaves your physical body and travels to realms most people never consciously experience. And here's what's fascinating. Cayce didn't just theorize about this. He documented it in thousands of readings, explaining exactly what happens during those mysterious hours of sleep and why some people wake up feeling drained instead of refreshed. If this resonates with you, Drop a comment sharing your own sleep experiences. Have you ever woken up more tired than when you went to bed? I'll mark every comment with a heart because this conversation matters. And if you're ready to explore the mysteries of consciousness with me, hit that subscribe button and let's journey together into the unknown. Edgar Cayce spent over 40 years in a unique trance state, delivering readings that would challenge everything we think we know about sleep, consciousness, and the nature of human existence. Born in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, Cayce discovered his extraordinary ability almost by accident. But what he revealed about the nightly journey of the soul would become some of his most profound and transformative teachings. During one of his most impactful readings from the early 1930s, Cayce was asked a seemingly simple question: what happens to us when we sleep? His answer was anything but simple. According to Cayce, sleep is not merely a physical rest period for the body. It's a spiritual journey. Every night, as your physical body lies still, your soul, your consciousness, your essential self, detaches and travels to other dimensions of reality. This isn't death. It's not astral projection in the mystical sense. It's something far more natural and essential to human existence. Cayce explained that the soul needs to return to its source, to reconnect with the divine energy that sustains all life. Think of it like a phone that needs to be recharged. During the day, you use your spiritual battery navigating the physical world, dealing with stress, emotions, relationships, and countless decisions. By nighttime, that battery is depleted. Sleep provides the opportunity for your soul to literally leave the physical plane and return to what Cayce called the spiritual realms to recharge, to reconnect, and to receive guidance. But here's what Ninga Mesperava: not everyone's soul travels the same way during sleep. In his readings, Cayce revealed that the quality of your spiritual journey during sleep depends entirely on your mental and spiritual state when you fall asleep. If you go to bed with anger, fear, resentment, or anxiety weighing on your mind, your soul carries that energy with it. Instead of smoothly transitioning to higher spiritual realms where true rest and rejuvenation occur, your consciousness gets trapped in lower vibrational planes, turbulent dimensions where unresolved emotions create chaotic dream experiences. This is why you can sleep for 8 hours and wake up feeling like you've been in a battle all night, because in a very real sense, you have been. Your soul has been struggling through dense emotional landscapes instead of ascending to the peaceful, healing dimensions where restoration actually happens. One woman came to Cayce during the Great Depression era, exhausted despite sleeping what seemed like adequate hours each night. She described waking up with a sense of dread, as if she'd been working all night long. Through his reading, Cayce revealed something extraordinary. Her soul was indeed working during sleep, but not in the way she needed. She was carrying unresolved grief about her father's passing into her sleep state. Every night, her consciousness would seek him out in the spiritual dimensions, creating exhausting dream experiences that prevented true rest. Cayce's guidance was specific and practical. Before sleep, she needed to release that grief through prayer and meditation, essentially giving permission for her soul to rest rather than search. She needed to trust that her father was exactly where he needed to be, and that she would connect with him when the time was spiritually appropriate. Within weeks of following Cayce's advice, her sleep transformed. She began waking refreshed, energized, and at peace. This reveals something profound about Cayce's understanding of sleep. He didn't see it as passive unconsciousness. He viewed it as active spiritual work. And the quality of that work determined the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health during waking hours. In another remarkable reading from the early 1940s, Cayce described the actual mechanics of the soul's departure during sleep. He explained that there's a silver cord, an energetic connection that links your physical body to your traveling consciousness. This cord can stretch infinitely across dimensions, always maintaining the vital connection between body and soul. Death occurs only when this cord is severed. Sleep is safe because the cord remains intact, allowing your soul to journey while your physical form continues its biological processes. But Cayce warned about something that modern sleep science is only now beginning to understand: the danger of sudden, violent awakenings. When you're jolted awake abruptly by an alarm clock, a loud noise, or external disturbance, your soul hasn't had time to properly reintegrate with your physical body. You feel disoriented, confused, sometimes even nauseous. That's not just grogginess. According to Cayce, it's the shock of your consciousness being yanked back into physical form before it's ready. He advocated for natural awakening whenever possible, allowing the body and soul to reunite gradually as dawn approaches. This is why you sometimes wake up naturally, just before your alarm goes off. Your soul has completed its spiritual work and is gently returning, sensing the approaching morning. Now let me share something that will change how you think about dreams forever. In multiple readings throughout his career, Cayce explained that dreams are not random neural firings or meaningless subconscious garbage. Dreams are memories of where your soul traveled during sleep. Some dreams feel chaotic and nonsensical because your soul passed through lower vibrational planes, dimensions where unresolved human emotions create unstable landscapes. Other dreams feel profound, peaceful, and meaningful because your soul reached higher spiritual realms where wisdom and healing reside. Cayce taught people to pay attention to the emotional quality of their dreams rather than getting lost in bizarre symbolism. A dream that leaves you feeling peaceful and loved indicates your soul reached beneficial spiritual dimensions. A nightmare or anxious dream suggests your consciousness got entangled in lower planes, often because of the mental and emotional state you carried into sleep. This understanding gives us incredible power over our sleep quality. We're not helpless victims of insomnia or restless nights. We have the ability to influence where our soul travels by consciously preparing for sleep. During a session that changed one family's life forever, Cayce gave specific instructions for preparing for sleep. First, review your day without judgment, acknowledging mistakes and successes with equal acceptance. This releases emotional baggage that would otherwise weigh down your soul. Second, practice forgiveness, both of others and yourself. Resentment and guilt are heavy anchors that prevent your consciousness from ascending to healing dimensions. Third, set a spiritual intention for your sleep, essentially programming where you want your soul to go. This could be as simple as saying, "Tonight I seek spiritual guidance," or "I open myself to divine healing." One man in Virginia Beach followed these practices after years of chronic fatigue that doctors couldn't explain. Medical tests showed nothing wrong, yet he was perpetually exhausted. Cayce's reading revealed that his soul was spending every night trapped in what could only be described as spiritual quicksand, unable to rise to restful dimensions because of deep-seated anger toward his business partner. The physical body wasn't diseased. The soul was exhausted from nightly spiritual struggle. Within 1 month of practicing Cayce's sleep preparation techniques, particularly focused forgiveness work, the man's energy returned completely. He reported not only sleeping better, but experiencing vivid, meaningful dreams that felt like actual visits to beautiful, peaceful places. Cayce confirmed in a follow-up reading that the man's soul was now traveling to beneficial spiritual realms, returning each morning truly refreshed. But here's what fascinates me most about Cayce's sleep teachings, the implications for human consciousness itself. If our souls genuinely leave our bodies every night, traveling to spiritual dimensions beyond physical space and time, then we're not really confined to this physical existence at all. We're multidimensional beings, citizens of both physical and spiritual worlds, moving between them every single day of our lives. This explains so many mysteries that conventional science struggles with. Why do people sometimes have dreams about events before they happen? According to Cayce, because in the spiritual realms where souls travel during sleep, time doesn't exist in the linear way we experience it physically. Your soul might glimpse future possibilities during its nightly journey, bringing that information back as precognitive dreams. Why do people separated by thousands of miles sometimes dream about each other on the same night? Because in the spiritual dimensions, distance is irrelevant. Souls that love each other or share deep connections naturally meet during sleep, creating the phenomenon of shared dreams that both people remember upon waking. Cayce documented cases where people received healing during sleep that manifested physically upon waking. A woman with a chronic skin condition that resisted all medical treatment experienced a dream where a being of light touched her affected areas. She woke to find the condition significantly improved. Cayce explained that her soul had accessed healing dimensions during sleep, and the spiritual healing manifested physically because body and soul are intimately connected. This is revolutionary. It means sleep isn't just physical rest, it's spiritual medicine. And we've been treating it so carelessly, filling our minds with television violence, scrolling through anxiety-inducing social media right before bed, carrying our daily stress directly into sleep without any transition or release. No wonder so many people wake up tired. We're sending our souls into the spiritual realms carrying 50 pounds of emotional baggage, wondering why the journey feels exhausting. In his readings, Cayce emphasized that the bedroom environment matters tremendously, not because of feng shui or superstition, but because the energy in your sleeping space influences the initial trajectory of your soul's departure. A bedroom filled with clutter, electronics, or reminders of unfinished work creates spiritual static, making it harder for your consciousness to smoothly transition to beneficial dimensions. He recommended simple, peaceful sleeping spaces, ideally with the head of the bed facing east to align with Earth's magnetic field and spiritual energy flows. He suggested soft natural materials and minimal electronic interference. These weren't arbitrary preferences. Cayce understood that the physical environment affects the energetic environment, which in turn affects the quality of the soul's nightly journey. One of the most practical applications of Cayce's sleep teachings involves understanding sleep cycles. Long before modern sleep science identified REM cycles, Cayce explained that the soul doesn't leave immediately upon falling asleep. There's a gradual disconnection process as the physical body settles into deep rest. This is why the first hour or two of sleep feels deepest and most restorative. Your soul is fully engaged in its spiritual journey during this time. Toward morning, as the body naturally prepares to wake, the soul begins its return journey. This is why dreams are often most vivid and memorable in the early morning hours. Your consciousness is in the process of reintegrating with your physical form, and you're experiencing the final stages of your spiritual journey with greater awareness. Cayce warned against sleep deprivation, calling it not just physical harm, but spiritual starvation. When you consistently shortchange your sleep, you're not giving your soul adequate time to complete its necessary spiritual work. The consequences aren't just physical fatigue. You become spiritually depleted, disconnected from your higher self, unable to access the intuition and guidance that comes from regular soul travel to spiritual dimensions. This explains why sleep deprivation affects mood, decision-making, and emotional regulation so dramatically. It's not just brain chemistry, it's spiritual malnutrition. Your soul hasn't had time to recharge, to receive guidance, to process the spiritual lessons embedded in daily experiences. Durante the war years, Cayce gave readings to soldiers and their families who were experiencing terrible nightmares and disrupted sleep. He explained that the trauma and fear associated with war created particularly dense emotional energy that souls had to navigate during sleep. The nightmares weren't just psychological, they were actual experiences of consciousness struggling through turbulent spiritual planes created by collective human fear and violence. His remedy was always the same: conscious spiritual preparation before sleep, prayer and meditation to elevate consciousness above the dense emotional frequencies, and most importantly, trust in divine protection and guidance. He taught that no soul is ever truly alone during its nightly journey. Spiritual guides, guardian energies, and divine consciousness itself are always available to assist, but only if we consciously invite that assistance. This brings us to perhaps the most profound aspect of Cayce's sleep teachings, the purpose of the soul's nightly journey. It's not random wandering. According to Cayce, during sleep, your soul is attending what he called the temple of learning in the spiritual realms. Here, consciousness receives instruction, guidance, and healing from higher spiritual teachers. The lessons learned during these nightly classes gradually filter into your conscious awareness as intuition, inspiration, sudden insights, and spiritual growth. People who wake up with solutions to problems they couldn't solve the day before aren't just benefiting from subconscious processing. Their souls literally attended spiritual instruction during sleep and brought back the wisdom needed to address their earthly challenges. Artists, inventors, and creative people throughout history have reported receiving their best ideas during sleep or immediately upon waking. Cayce would say their souls accessed dimensions of pure creativity and inspiration during their nightly journey, returning with gifts from the spiritual realms to be manifested in physical form. This means every single person has access to infinite wisdom and guidance, not through complicated rituals or special abilities, but simply through conscious, intentional sleep. The spiritual university is open to everyone, every single night. The question is whether we arrive as prepared students ready to learn, or as scattered, distracted consciousness too caught up in earthly drama to receive the teachings available to us. One of Cayce's most beautiful sleep-related readings came from his work in Virginia Beach, where he had established his hospital and research center. A young child was having terrible nightmares that disrupted the entire household. The parents were exhausted and worried. Through his reading, Cayce revealed that the child's soul was particularly sensitive and was perceiving genuine spiritual disturbances that adults had learned to block out. The nightmares weren't imagination. They were real experiences of a young soul navigating dimensions without adequate spiritual protection. Cayce taught the parents to pray with the child before sleep, not just reciting words, but genuinely surrounding the child's consciousness with protective spiritual energy and loving intention. He also recommended a simple ritual of visualizing white light surrounding the child's body and spirit. Within days, the nightmares stopped completely. The child began sleeping peacefully and even reported happy dreams of playing with other children in beautiful gardens. The parents asked Cayce if these happy dreams were real. His answer changed their understanding of reality itself. He explained that the spiritual dimensions are just as real as the physical world, perhaps more so. The gardens and playmates the child experienced during sleep existed in spiritual reality. The child's soul was genuinely playing and learning in those dimensions, then returning to the physical body refreshed and joyful. This raises an incredible question. What if the spiritual realms we visit during sleep are actually our true home, and physical existence is the temporary journey? Cayce certainly suggested this in many readings, explaining that the soul is eternal and immortal, while the physical body is simply a temporary vehicle for earthly experience. During sleep, we return briefly to our true home, reconnecting with our eternal nature before resuming the earthly journey. If this is true, then fear of sleep, insomnia, and sleep resistance take on new meaning. Perhaps we're afraid to let go because we've forgotten who we really are. We've become so identified with the physical body and personality that releasing into sleep feels like a small death, a loss of control, a vulnerability. Cayce's teachings invite us to remember that sleep is actually a return to safety, to our spiritual home, to dimensions where we're loved, guided, and nurtured. When we approach sleep with this awareness, everything changes. It becomes not something to fear or resist, but something to embrace with gratitude and conscious intention. So what about those mornings when you still wake up tired despite doing everything right? Cayce addressed this too. Sometimes, he explained, the soul's spiritual work is particularly intense. You might be processing major life lessons, receiving important guidance for upcoming challenges, or even assisting other souls in the spiritual dimensions. Yes, according to Cayce, more spiritually advanced souls sometimes serve as helpers to others during sleep, a form of spiritual service that can be energetically demanding. If you wake up tired but peaceful, with a sense that you've done important work even if you don't remember the details, that's often what's happening. Your soul was engaged in meaningful spiritual service, and the fatigue is temporary. Honor it, rest when possible, and trust that the work you did during sleep was necessary and valuable. But if you wake up tired and anxious, drained and heavy, that indicates your soul is still struggling with unresolved emotional or spiritual issues that need conscious attention. This is your spirit's way of sending you a message. Something needs to be addressed, forgiven, released, or healed. Cayce never saw physical symptoms as separate from spiritual causes. Chronic sleep problems, in his view, always pointed to spiritual imbalances that needed attention. The body was communicating what the soul was experiencing. As we approach the end of our journey together through Cayce's sleep teachings, I want you to think about tonight differently. As you prepare for bed, remember that you're not just lying down to rest. You're preparing your soul for an extraordinary journey to dimensions beyond physical comprehension. You're returning temporarily to your spiritual home, where healing, learning, and transformation await. Take a few moments before sleep to consciously release the day. Forgive others and yourself. Set a spiritual intention. Invite divine guidance and protection. Thank your body for carrying you through another day of physical existence. Welcome your soul's upcoming journey with trust and openness. When you wake tomorrow morning, take a moment before jumping into activity. Notice how you feel. If you're refreshed, give thanks for the spiritual nourishment your soul received. If you're tired, ask yourself honestly what emotional or spiritual issues might need your conscious attention. Don't judge yourself. Simply observe with compassion and willingness to grow. Edgar Cayce's legacy lives on through the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, where tens of thousands of his readings are preserved and studied. But his most accessible legacy is the gift he gave every single person. The understanding that we're spiritual beings having a temporary physical experience, that our souls journey every night to realms beyond imagination, and that sleep itself is sacred, a divine gift that connects us to our eternal nature. You are so much more than you think you are. Your consciousness is not confined to your skull. Your existence doesn't begin at birth or end at death. Every night you prove this by traveling to dimensions that exist beyond time and space, returning each morning with the spiritual nourishment that sustains your earthly journey. Tonight, sleep consciously. Tomorrow, wake aware. And slowly, gradually, you'll remember what Edgar Cayce always knew. You are an eternal soul, and sleep is your nightly journey home. Before we close, I want to hear from you. What's your biggest struggle with sleep? Do you wake up tired or refreshed? Have you ever had a dream that felt more real than waking life? Share your experiences in the comments below. I promise to read every single one and mark them with a heart, because your journey matters. And if these teachings resonated with your soul, hit that subscribe button. We're building a community of conscious seekers, exploring the deepest mysteries of human existence together. The next revelation is just around the corner, and I want you there with me. Until next time, sleep well and journey safely.